Hello and welcome to Oracle Applications Cloud Training. This is the first session for cost accounting, and in today's session we'll cover these topics. We'll start with a basic overview of the cost accounting module. This is pretty much different from what we had in 11 and 12 coming from EBS background. A lot of new concept structures have been added to the cost accounting or costing module, and we'll go through them first, like what are the cost organization structure, what is a cost book, what is the cost profile. We'll go through that in details. Then we'll go through some end-to-end business scenarios, like if you have an average costing, then how the cost will be calculated when you receive a new material to your inventory. Of course, there are various ways in which you can receive a new material to the inventory: through a work order, through a purchase order, through a miscellaneous transactions, through receipt of an IR. There are various ways, but for simplification purpose, we'll just use miscellaneous issue. But we'll go through the entire process of receiving a new material and checking how the cost will happen, and when you do transactions, which accounts get debited, which accounts get credited, and from where system derives all those accounts. We'll do that for average costing, standard costing, as well as actual costing. So this is a bit different if you are coming from EBS background, because in EBS we had 4 different kind of costing methods: standard, average, LIFO, FIFO. However, in Fusion we have standard, average, and instead of LIFO, FIFO we have actual, and the actual cost is very much similar to FIFO. There are a few differences, but more or less it is same as the FIFO costing. As of now, version 13, Cloud version 13 or Fusion version 13, Oracle have come up with any LIFO method, LIFO costing method, but in future release it might be there. But as of now, there is no LIFO costing method in Oracle Cloud. So after going through the end-to-end business scenarios, we'll go through some other costing tasks. During this end-to-end business scenario, we'll go through many costing tasks. As a cost accountant, what you should be doing in the costing module in Oracle applications. However, there will be many accounting tasks which won't be covered in the end-to-end scenarios. There will be many things which will be need to be done once in a month or once in a quarter. Those things will be not done as part of your transactions, but more or less like not setups, but one-time definitions, one-time data creations that you won't be doing on a regular basis. We'll go through that as part of the cost accounting tasks. And finally, after completing all the cost accounting tasks and the end-to-end scenario, we'll go through basic setups that is required as part of the cost accounting module. This is not required if you're not working in an IT role, because this setups will be done only once when you do the implementation of the project, or whenever there is a new upgradation or some changes are required. So if you're working as a cost accountant, you're working as technician, operator, or an engineer who needs to understand how the costing module works, then maybe you can ignore the slides on setups. But if you're working as an IT implementer, you are working as a IT consultant who do the setups for your end clients, then you can go through these setups to understand how it is being done. There are a few things which are similar as EBS, but there are many things which have completely changed. So it's very much important to understand all the new setups and how it is being done. So let's get started. I'll log into a Vision instance. So as soon as you log into Vision, this is the home page, what Oracle calls the dashboard or springboard. And once you log in, if you have the access, if you have the cost accountant role, then you'll be able to see the costing icon over here, from where we do all the costing related activities. So as I mentioned, you need to have a cost accountant role to have access to this. We'll go through that in next couple of slides. Once you click on the costing icon, then you'll see 2 options. One is cost accounting, another is receipt accounting. Cost accounting is more for various inventory and WIP transactions. When you receive something in your inventory, when you see a sales order, when you receive a purchase order, when you do any kind of material issue or material return from an work order or to an work order. All those transactions takes place in the those submodules, and then it are transferred to the cost accounting module. Receipt accounting is only for PO receipt. So when you are receiving a material, through a purchase order, then the first step will be happening in the receipt accounting. Then the second step, the receipt of the material, the movement of the material from the receiving area to the inventory, that will be happening through the cost accounting area. In today's session, we'll be more focusing on this cost accounting. We'll have separate session for receipt accounting. Next is what is cost management? So cost management is the module that keeps the track of the value of an item in the inventory and WIP. So when you are doing some transactions, where you're receiving materials in your inventory, you are shipping materials out of your inventory, you are processing materials in your work in process. So when the item flows through this all the inventories and WIP, something needs to keep the track of the inventory valuations, the evaluations, and that is done by the cost management module in Oracle. It's the same as what it was in R12 and 11i. The cost management module tracks all your cost throughout the supply chain, starting from receipt of the goods to the point when it is shipped out of your inventory. Costing is defined as the process of identifying the cost of the business, breaking them down, and relating them to the various activities of the organizations. Costing of a product is the determination of unit cost to sell a product. It's not just about selling a product, it's also about how much cost you spend on procuring a product, the total landed cost that you spend on receiving a product, then how much cost you spend in making or building a finished good, and how much cost you spend in shipping that product to the end customer. So it's the combination of various cost elements, various expenditures that you spend to have an active business. Then cost management is the process of recording and reporting measurements of cost of manufacturing goods and performing services in the aggregate as well as in the detail level. These are all definitions which are correct in one way or the other way. The basic point is cost management is the module in which you track all your cost, whether it is inventory cost, whether it is project cost, whether you're purchasing cost, all the manufacturing cost, sales cost, everything that is part of your business, then that is part of your cost management. Of course, there will be various other costs which are not part of your COGS, like paying salary to your employees, the expenses that you occurred for travel or other things that you don't want to part of your COGS, that won't be in the cost management module. Cost management module tracks the cost of goods sold from the point of receiving to the point of sales. Any cost outside that won't be part of the cost management module. How cost management integrates with other modules in Oracle Cloud application. So cost management integrates with all the other subledgers or submodules or modules, you can say, such as inventory, purchasing, BOM, WIP, order management. All the information comes from these modules to the cost management module. So here we do the transactions. In inventory, we do all the inventory transactions, like receiving the product for PO, or when we do some miscellaneous transactions, or when you issue materials to a project. All those transactions happen in the inventory transactions, and that information will flow from inventory to cost management. Similarly, all the informations, it's not necessary that we'll be transforming informations, only the transactions from these modules. There will be certain cases we'll be just transforming informations from these models. Like similarly, work in process sends all the work related informations to costing module. Order management sends all the shipping related informations to the cost management. And in the cost management, we do the distributions, we create the journals, and then we, if there is an evaluation in variance, whether it is in standard costing or in average costing, we calculate the variances, and finally everything is posted to the GL from the cost management, and your income statement and balance sheet are maintained in the GL, which comes from the cost management. Cost management is one of your important subledgers where all the inventory related and WIP related transactions takes place. Let's start with what is the expectations from a cost accountant. What are the main activities a cost accountant is supposed to do? There are primarily two activities. One is to make sure that the inventory valuations are correct. What does that mean? That means whenever there is a transaction, that transaction is properly distributed and properly accounted. So suppose you are doing a sub-inventory transfer from one sub-inventory to another sub-inventory, or you are issuing some materials to a work order. So as soon as the transaction is done, in what used to happen in EBS, in R12 or in 11i, whenever you do the transactions, the distribution takes place when the costing, there is the program costing program runs. But in R2, in Fusion, it is different. In Fusion, the costing is completely segregated from the operational activity. So when you do an operation, when you do an operation transactions, costing actually doesn't do anything. There is a program that needs to run, and that program will bring all those transactions from the inventory or receiving or from WIP to the costing module. And then in the costing we need to make sure that the distribution happens as well as the journals are created. So there are two different programs. We'll see that in next slide. This program needs to be run. So as a cost accountant, you need to make sure that whatever the operation is doing, whatever the planners, buyers, technicians, warehouse persons are doing as per their daily regular activities, as per their daily regular jobs, those physical transactions, those operational transactions are tracked in your financial system, in your costing module. That's the first aspect. And the second aspect is you need to make sure that before the month end, all these journals or all these transactions have been audited, have been reconciled, and there is no issue before we move to the next month, so that you can close the period, and next month when the next period is opened, all the transactions will happen in the next period. So these are the primary two activities of a cost accountant, and both these activities are properly defined in Fusion application. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that to access cost accounting module, you need to have a role, and that role is called cost accountant role. The role concept was there in R12, not in 11a. 11a there was nothing called in role, but in R12 Oracle started with RBAC, role-based access control. However, it was very limited. Rather in Fusion, the RBAC concept is much more enhanced and it is much more flexible. So what happens here in R12, there is no concept of responsibility. To each user you assign a role, and as per their role they will have access to certain forms and functions where they can do their activities, when they can do their tasks. So one of the important role for a cost accountant is the cost accountant role. You can add the cost accountant role to a new user by navigating into security console. So I will say that in the system. So in setups and maintenance, or maybe from tools, you have to go to security console, and then you search for the user. You give the name to the user and click on this find button. So once you click on that, system will show you the username. Then you need to click on the user. Once you click on the user, system will take you to this page where you can add various roles, and this left hand side shows all the important roles required. If you're doing new implementations, you need to have all these basic roles so that you can work in all the modules. So to add a new role, you first if you just enter some part of the role name, system will show you list of the values. So suppose you want to add the manufacturing engineer role, then you just write MANU, then system will show you all the available roles starting with that name. Of course, you have the another option of clicking on this search icon. So once you click on the search icon, system will show you another form where you can search all the roles or just put some parameters. It's the advanced search form that's available throughout Oracle Fusion application. And once you select the role, click on add role, and then you also need to save it. I don't have the screenshot over here, but we'll see that in the system. So you need to save it. Then that role will be available to the user. It's not required that the user needs to log out or log in back. If they just move to the home and then search again, they will be able to see all those menus and functions which are available as part of the new role assigned to them. And you can also view the roles by navigating into the functional areas. So here in the setup menu, you can go to functional areas, user security, and here if you click on the manage users, you can search manage users. But there are few things which are restricted over there. You can do it in that form, and there are few things which are also restricted in the security console. Like if you want to assign a user to an employee, you can't do that from the security console. You have to do it from the manage users. Security console is kind of same what we used to have in R12 or 11i, the user form. The fields are quite similar, and this is added I think in version 11 or 12. It was not in Fusion from the beginning. In Fusion, the earlier versions, version 2, 3, there are various complicated way of managing users and resources and their roles, but now it is more streamlined, and the forms, the fields feel more like the R12 versions, the 11a versions. So we'll go and check how that is done in system. So here, as I said, there are two different ways in which you can do it. The first one is you can go to admin, on the top of your browser, you'll see your username, click on that, and then from there you can go to setup and maintenance. And because user is something which is part of all the modules, so you can do that from any of the modules. But as you are working in costing, will go to manufacturing and supply chain material management. And then here, if you go to users and all tasks, then yeah, here you can do create implementation users, but that's not the best way of doing it. The best way is doing from users and security. So here you see the manage users, and in the manage users you can click on it and then search the username, and the username will come. And then suppose I want to search Casey Brown. And as soon as you get the person's name, you click on it. Then system will take to the other page from where you can see all the details of the user, and here you can make modifications to the user. However, here if you see the role, the existing roles, all the roles that's being already added to the if you click on the current roles, you can see all the roles that is being already added to this user. And if you want to remove something, you can go ahead and click on that and remove button. Then you can easily do it over here. Now, this is one way in which you can modify the user details. You can remove roles to an user. However, if you want to add a new user, there is also one more way of doing it. So if you click on this navigator and go to tools and go to security console and search the username again. The first tab is the roles tab, so click on the users tab, and here if you search for Casey Brown, click on the user login, and system will take you the user's details page, and here you can click on edit. There are few things that you can change in that form. There are few things you can change only in this form. In that form, you can change the associated worker information. So if you want to change the worker name or manager or job, then you have to do it in that form. But in this form, you can do certain changes, like you can reset the password. If you click over here, then system will show you reset password, where you can change the password. Or if you want to add a new role, you can click on the add role button over here and then search for the role. Just put some name, system will show you the list of all the roles with that name. Now, as you can see here, I can see a lot of roles with cost accountant. However, I don't see the generic cost accountant role, because that role is already been added to this user. So if a role is already added to an user, you won't see that role. However, you can see there are a lot of other roles which are view specific, but that's not required. Again, this is something which completely changed from version 10. I think from Infusion version 10. Before that, we used to have roles specific to business units, specific to organizations. You can still do that over here, but that's not required. There are various other ways. Basically, what you need to do, you come over here and add the role as cost accountant, because that role is already added, so we don't see it over here. So if you can scroll down again, I should be able to see that role already added to this user somewhere here. Yeah, you can see the cost accountant role is already added to the user, and it's already there. That's why you don't see when you click on the add role button. Okay. So next are scheduled processes. Scheduled processes is a new terminology. We used to have concurrent requests or concurrent programs in EBS in 11 and 12. And the scheduled process is almost the same thing. Instead of request or programs, we call it scheduled processes. So these are the important processes that you need to run as part of the costing modules. Mostly you will be scheduling it to run it in every 5 minutes or 10 minutes in production. However, while doing testing, you need to make sure that these programs have run, so that you can check all the transactions that you do in an inventory or week or EAM that's available in the costing module. So the first one is transfer transactions from inventory. So what it does, it transfers all the transactions that you do in inventory to the costing module, because as I mentioned earlier, in EBS when you are doing any transaction, when you are, suppose you are receiving a material, you do a miscellaneous receipt. So as soon as you receive, do the transactions, then system creates the transactions, as well as when the costing program runs, it will find out the accounts which will be debited and the account which will be credited. So if I can go to Oracle EBS, I'll try to show you that. Okay, it will take some time to open. In the meantime, so what happens? Suppose in EBS, if I try to make you understand. So when you do a transactions, we do the first thing as we do a transaction, and after that the costing program runs. And when the costing program runs, what it does, it creates all the distribution. It doesn't create any journal, but it creates the distribution. It creates the distribution. That means which account will be debited and which account will be credited. That happens as part of the subledger wherever we are doing the transactions. If it is an inventory or it is an WIP, that module decides where we'll be doing the transactions. Because if you remember, in inventory and WIP, we used to set up a lot of accounts. In item level, we used to have a lot of accounts. In organization parameter, we used to have a lot of accounts. There are a lot of accounts we need to define in EBS, which is a complete different in Fusion. Because in Fusion, you don't create any accounts in any other forms rather than the something called mapping set. We'll see that in different session. But that's the thing. So when suppose I go to inventory module in EBS, this is only for those people who have already worked in in EBS 11 and R12. If you haven't worked, then just you can ignore all this. I just wanted to make sure that people who have already worked in this ERP systems, they find it easy to understand how things work over here. I don't have any transactions, so here if you see, as soon as you used to do a transactions in EBS, then the distributions get populated when the costing program runs. And here you can see the accounts that will be get debited and accounts that will be credited. And after that, we need to run another program called create accounting. So first was costing program, then we used to have run create accounting. And that's create accounting was, it's run for the cost module. Now in R12, we are doing only this part in the costing module, but in Fusion, in cloud, you are doing both this in the costing module. So in the inventory module, in the WIP module, in the sales module, in various other modules, whenever you are doing a transactions, you are just only doing the transactions. You are not trying to create the distribution. You are not trying to create the accounting. That happens only in the costing module. And that's why you need to transfer all the transactions from inventory to costing. And after that only you can do the distribution and the journal creation. That's very important to understand how the structure has changed from R12 to Fusion. So the first one is for transferring transactions from inventory. The second one does the same thing, but it transfer all the transactions from WIP, work order, various work order transactions, material transactions, resource transactions from the WIP module to the costing module. And the third one does the same thing, but for the asset maintenance, the EAM module. So whatever transactions, work order transactions you do, the maintenance work orders you create in the EAM module, that will be transferred from EAM to the costing. And then the costing, in the costing module, you process that transaction. Okay, so next is organization structure, which you see in the left hand side, we have the diagram, the basic structure. At the top level, we have the legal entity, then we have the business unit, which is similar to your operating unit in R12 and 11i. And under operating unit and business unit, we used to have inventory organizations, but now it's the same structure. We have the inventory organization. So whenever you're doing any inventory transactions, you do it in the inventory organization level. However, it's not necessary that you maintain your cost in the inventory organization level. You can maintain the cost in a cost organization level. Suppose in R12, if you have three different plants, say in UK, you have one plant in Manchester, one in Edinburgh, and one in say London. These are the three plants. It comes by default in the Vision instance, so I'm just giving their name. So if you have three different plants, and suppose all they belongs to a single operating unit, and it's the profit center manager or the general manager is same for all these three inventory organization. So in that case, there is a good probability that you want to maintain the same cost for the same item. Of course, different items will have different cost. Suppose you have an item as item A, then you want to maintain the cost as if I just give an example. So here we have, say, three different organization: inventory organization A, inventory organization B, inventory organization C. And now suppose I want to maintain the price for an item XYZ as say $20 in all the three different inventory organizations. In Fusion or in cloud, you can maintain the cost of the same item in three different inventory organizations in a single cost organization. So we need to have that mapping, all the different inventory organizations. The cost organizations will be maintaining the cost for different inventory organizations. There is always a one-to-one mapping. One-to-one in the sense that from cost organizations to inventory organization, it is one-to-many, but from inventory organizations to cost organizations, it is always one-to-one. You cannot have the same inventory organizations in two different cost organizations. That logically doesn't make any sense. So here, if I go back to the same example, so instead of having three different cost organizations, you can have a single cost organizations as, say, CO Financial. So you have three different inventory organizations, but for maintaining the cost in those three different inventory organizations, you just create a one single cost organization. Is it possible to have three different cost organizations? Yes, you can do that. If your business requirement is that you need to maintain cost in different organizations. And why you need to do that, you can see there are few points you need to consider before deciding how many cost organizations you need to create. There are various business reasons why you might need to have one cost organizations per inventory organizations. But if there is no real justification, there is no real business need, then you can consolidate all your inventory organization in a single cost organizations and maintain that in the single cost organization level. Okay, next we'll see the various cost accounting setups and tasks. So this is, I think I have already shown this form. So to create the setups related to cost accounting, you need to go to manufacturing and supply chain material management setups. And here towards the bottom, you see cost accounting. And in the cost accounting, in the right hand side, you see all the tasks. Here you see the required task. If you click on show all tasks, it will show you all the tasks as part of the cost accounting. Required tasks are the tasks which are mandatory, that needs to be completed before you can start working on the specific module. And the right hand side, you see all the tasks that's part of the cost accounting module. We'll be going through them one by one in this presentation. So I'll just show you quickly in the Fusion form. So if I cancel this, and again the same thing, to go to setup and maintenance, you click on your username and then click on setup and maintenance. Of course, for this you need to have the access. You need to have IT security manager role, then only you can access. There are three things you need to have. IT security manager is required for maintaining users, and then application consultant and application managerial roles you need to have for setups. So I can quickly show you that it was in one of the previous slides that I just shared. So if I go back here, so these are the responsibilities you need to have if you want to have the set of access: application implementation consultant, application implementation manager. As well, it is good to have IT security manager if you are starting to do any implementation, because you need to create new users, and for that you need to have the IT security manager role. So here, if I select manufacturing supply chain and scroll down to costing, or rather cost accounting, then I can see all the required tasks. These are all the 9, 10, 11, I think something around 10, 11 tasks that is required as part of cost accounting module. And if I select all tasks, then it will show me all the tasks that is required for cost accounting. Now to view all the tasks that is required as part of the cost accounting module, let me go back to the home, and here if I select cost accounting, then it will take me to the cost accounting dashboard. So this is the home page. This again might look different if you are in version 10.11, because Oracle tried to consolidate a lot of different activities, different tasks in version 12. Yeah, this thing is that the cloud or the Fusion applications, the UI and the functionalities are changing a lot from one release to another release. In R12 or 11i, the small upgrades didn't have that much of functionality, because it's still actively working on developing various features and needs. So from one release to another release, a lot of things changes. Anyway, so this is the dashboard for the cost accounting, and if you want to access all the tasks, you click over here. So this will show you all the tasks. So this is, there will be, depending on the module, you'll have tasks. Then the second one will be the reports, which is access to directly your BI reports. And in few modules, you'll also have one more tab over here. These are the vertical tabs. You'll have one more tab from where you can search. That will see in the item master, as well as in few modules where you can directly search various transactions or various documents. Okay, this is how you access all your tasks and setup as required in the costing module. So cost book is a framework within which you define all your accounting policies. Now this is very important, because the cost book concept is completely new in Fusion. We didn't have that in R12. So in R12, if you think, suppose I have an item, say, if I go back to here, suppose I have an item XYZ. Now that item XYZ, suppose it has standard cost. I want to have this item under standard costing. And if I have another item, say XYZ2, and if both these items are in same inventory organization, say inventory organization A, there is no way I could have this as standard costing and this as average costing, because the costing method was determined in the inventory organization level. So if I go back to Oracle and open the cost, the form and the organization form where you define the costing method, you'll realize what I'm trying to say. So I come over here and so this is R12 where we used to define inventory organization, and there we used to decide the costing method. So if you go to inventory information, here you can see the costing method. And the costing method is, we had 4 different methods, and in Fusion we have standard, average, and instead of FIFO, we have the actual costing. So we have 3 different methods as of now. So now the thing is, here the costing method is decided in the organization level, and all the items in that organizations will have the same costing method. However, that's not the case in Fusion. In Fusion, you can have the same, one item in the same organizations having average costing, another item having the standard costing. How it makes in business sense, there is a lot of business reasons why you need to have it. You need to decide why you want to have one item as a standard cost or an item has an average cost. Normally the business reason is, if you don't have any control on the cost of an item, there are many items which prices fluctuates a lot, and you really don't have any control, then you probably want to have them as average costing. However, there are many products where you have more control on the cost of the item, because the buyers, as a buyer, when you are purchasing those material from a supplier, you have a lot of control on the supplier, because you buy a lot of my product, and the product is the price doesn't vary with time. So those items you might want to have as a standard costing. So, but that was not possible in R12. In R12, if you decided to have standard costing or average costing, all your items going to be costed in the same way. But in Fusion, you can do that, and one of the that's defined in the cost profile. We'll go to that. But the cost profile works with cost books. So you need to understand what is a cost book. So cost book is a framework. It's a set of framework under which we define all these accounting policies. Whether what is the costing method, how the accounts will be derived. There are a lot of things that we define as part of the cost book. In this form, we really don't do anything. We just give a name to a cost book. But there are many other forms where we'll be using the name of this cost book as part of defining our policies. You can define different cost book for each of your financial accounting, management, reporting, and analysis purpose. So normally, what you'll see that suppose you have, if I go back again to the same example, suppose we have the 3 different inventory organizations, then usually you will have one cost book as your financial cost book. So this was organizations. If I go back, so now you'll have one cost book as financial cost book, and then you will have cost book for inventory organization A, then you'll have cost book for inventory organization B, and cost organization for inventory. Now, why you'll have that? So the primary reason is that when you define cost book, one of the cost book needs to be associated with your primary ledger. Okay, and that is the cost book in which all the accounting will take place, because there is only one way in which you can generate the account. There is only one book in which you can generate the account. So if I try to explain with an example, suppose I do a miscellaneous receipt of item XYZ, and which has a cost of 10. So here, my inventory needs to get debited, and some other accounts, whichever account I give during the miscellaneous receipt, that account will get credited. Let's say some P&L account, ABC accounts, ABC1 account gets credited. Now this will happen in only one cost book, the cost book that is associated with the financial, financial primary ledger, the financial cost book, or the book that is associated with the primary ledger. So when you go to the cost relationship in the next slide, we'll see that. So there you can have many cost book, but in only one cost book the journals will be created. In one cost book the accounting will happen. Rest of the cost book system will generate all your distributions, and that you can use for your various other purposes, for analysis, for reporting, for various other purposes. So normally you'll have those cost book, those reporting cost books in the inventory organization level, and the financial cost book mostly it will be in the cost organizations level, so that you generate journals only in one book. Okay. Next is cost organization. So cost organizations, we just saw the slide about the structure of the cost organizations, and this is the place in which you define the cost organization. So normally, as I said, this will be like in most of the cases it will be like one cost organizations per operating unit, and if you have 2, 3, 4 different inventory organizations in that operating unit or that business unit, then you will assigning all those 3, 4 inventory organizations to the cost organization. So when you define the cost organizations, you go to this cost organization form, and we'll see both the cost book and cost organization after this slide. So you go over here, then you click on the plus sign, and that will open this new form where you enter, where you give a name to your new cost organizations, and you create give it a code. The code is similar to the inventory organizations code that we used to have in R12. And here also you have to select the legal entity in which the cost organizations belongs to. So there are 2 definitions that you need to always map. One is when you define the cost organizations, you need to have a legal entity, and you'll also see in the next slide that when you make the relationship between cost book and cost organizations, you need to have a default item validation organizations from where system will derive all the required information from the item validation organization. Now, points to consider while creating cost organizations: how many cost organizations you need to have. The first important thing is to consider your financial reporting and responsibility for accounting. A profit center business unit may contain 1 or more cost organizations depending on your user requirement. As I said, you can have, if you have 3 different inventory organizations, you can have 1 cost organizations, you can have 2 cost organizations, you can also have 3 cost organizations. Data security needs also, if you have 1 cost accountant working for all these 3 different inventory organizations, then what is the purpose of having 3 different cost organizations if you are going to maintain the same cost for for the same item across all the inventory organizations. There are various points you need to consider before deciding how many cost organizations needs to be created in the system. Now let's go to the form and see how the cost organizations and the cost books are created. It's the same. You need to go to manufacturing and supply chain management, then though it is showing the manufacturing and supply chain management, but it is not. I think it's in the HCM module, so I'll select it again, and here the cost accounting, and I'm in the required task, and here you can see the cost book. So the first thing that we'll do is create a new cost book. So as soon as you click on the in that link, the system will take you to this page, and this page will show you all the existing cost book. It's not same across all the forms. There are few forms when you open the form, the system will show you all the existing data, all few of the existing data, and there are few forms when system won't show you anything. That will be a blank page. You need to click on the search button to see all the information. So that's, I think it's because depends on how many informations are stored in that specific entity. If a lot of informations are stored, then Oracle doesn't show you any information at all. But if it is there only few information stored in that form, then Oracle by default shows you few of those details. Anyway, so if you know if you have already created a cost book and if you want to search it, then you can enter the cost book name over here, and there are the various parameters you can enter: start with, end with, equals, contains, whatever, and then click on the search button. If you don't know anything, then just click on the search button. That will be a blank search, and system will show you all the existing cost books. So these are all the existing cost books, and let's create a new one. So to create a new one, click on this plus sign button, and here let's give it a name as MICB, MI cost book, and description. So there is, as I have already mentioned, there is not really cost book. There are not many fields or informations that you stored in the cost book. It's just a definition. However, when you define the cost organizations, the relationship there, we define this cost book information. So first we created a cost book. This is the thing. Next we are going to create a cost organization. So the same page here, you can see the manage cost organization. So click on it, and here you will see system by default show me some of the existing cost organization. Same thing, you can search by clicking on the search button. To create a new one, click on the plus sign. A new pop-up will come, and here we can see the fields that needs to be entered. So the star mark is something that is mandatory, you need to enter. So let's say MI CO1, cost organization 1, and give it a name as MI cost org 1, and legal entity, let's create it in the UK. I don't remember the name of the legal entity, so I'll just search it. Yeah, UK legal entity, and select the status as active, and then save and close, and then click on done. So what we have done till now, we have created a cost book and we have created a cost organization. So next is to create the relationship between the cost book and cost organizations and various inventory organizations, and also we need to make sure that we have the data access for users. But let me go to the presentation first. Okay, so next, as I said, we need to define the cost organizations relationship. So what we have done till now, we have created a cost book, we created cost organizations, and there are many inventory organizations which already exist in the system. There is I have a different presentation, different session on inventory organizations. So if you are interested, you can watch that video to see how inventory organizations and other organizations are created in Fusion. But let's assume that there are many inventory organizations already exist in the system, and we want to map them out. So how it is done? So first you go to the cost organizations relationship form, then you search for your own cost organization. So when you go and click on the search button, then we'll see our cost organizations over here, MI cost organization 1. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we need to define the item validation org. We need to assign an item validation org for that specific cost organizations. The legal entity will default from the from the cost organizations, because when you created the cost organizations, we entered a legal entity name. So the legal entity name will default from there, but we need to enter the item validation org. So once this is done, in the line label we have 3 different tabs. One is set assignment, then inventory organizations, then cost book. The cost book is where we assign the cost book to the cost organizations, and you can have, as I said, many cost books within assigned to a single cost organizations, but only one of the cost book will be assigned to a primary book, that is assigned to a ledger. So here you can see the financial, the ledger is assigned to US primary ledger, and the primary book is enabled. And this is the only book in which you will be creating the journals. The create accounting checkbox is enabled. Rest of the books it's used only for reporting purpose or only for different analysis purpose, but system is not going to create any journal, system is not going to create any accounting in any of these books except the financial accounting book. And when you selected the book under here, you can select various period and validations. If something goes wrong, then what system will do. Most of the times you'll select it as error. You don't want any warning or something. If something goes wrong, then you just want system to show an error message. This is the third tab, the cost books tab. But before that, we also need to assign various inventory organizations that is a part of the cost organization. So this is the US operations, and under US operations coster, we have assigned all these inventory organization. That means there is only one cost organizations for 5 different inventory organizations. We are not creating cost organizations for each of these inventory organizations. And remember one thing, once the cost organization is assigned to an inventory, inventory organization is assigned to cost organizations, that inventory organizations won't be available for a new cost organizations mapping. So it's just make sure that, I have seen many support requests raised in Metlink in Oracle support that the inventory organization is not available in the cost organizations, because once it is assigned, that is assigned. You can't have many-to-many relationship, at least as of this version of Fusion. And logically also, I don't see any reason why I need to have a many-to-many relationship between inventory organizations to cost organization. And the first step is the set assignment, where you set the reference data object. So normally you will be using the enterprise, but you can also have common set, or if you try to want to define your own if you have your own reference data set, then you can assign both of them over here. First one will be definitely the enterprise set, then you can have your own reference data set over here. You can click on the plus sign and enter details over here. Now let's go to system and try to create the relationship between the inventory organizations and the cost organization and the cost book that we just created. So click on over here, manage cost organizations relationship. First we need to create the header record. I'm sorry. So here we need to select MI cost organizations. Now I can see the cost organization name. And as I said, the cost organizations code and the legal entity will default from the cost organizations, and here we need to enter the item validation organization. The item validation organizations is operations that comes by default with the Fusion instance, so we just use the same one. The first step is, as mentioned, is the set assignment. So here we'll use our enterprise assignment. So the cost core setups, reference data set, enterprise, or you can use your own one after defining enterprise. Suppose you have something else, then you can click on the plus sign and select your own reference data object. So let's say, normally you won't require to have select 2, 3, 4 different cost sets, but if you do have reference data set, then you can select it over here. Let me just delete it. It's not so important. Next is the important thing is the inventory organizations. Now when I click over here, now in UK legal entity there are many inventory organizations. I think by default there are 4 or 5 inventory organizations. However, I won't be able to see any inventory organizations over here right now, because all the existing inventory organizations have already been assigned. Okay, so if I click on the search button, then nothing is available, because all the existing inventory organizations have already been assigned to a cost organization. So if I create a new inventory organization, then that will be shown over here. That is one option. The second option is, if there is already an inventory organizations which is already assigned to a cost organizations but not yet transacted, you don't have any kind of transaction, you can still remove it from that cost organizations and assign to this new cost organization. Again, for that to happen, you should not have any kind of transaction in that inventory organization. See, if there is some transactions in the inventory organization and cost organization combination, then system won't allow you to remove it. I can show you that if I just go back to eco operations, and here I can see all the inventory organizations. Now suppose I want to remove the Manchester one and want to assign it in my organization, my cost organizations, then I can do that, because the cost organization and inventory combination cannot be deleted because it is referenced in some other setup. So there is some other setup, some already transactions have already been done, so we can't remove that. So what we can do, we can quickly create a new inventory organization, and then we'll try to assign that inventory organizations to our cost organization. So I'll go back to this form again and quickly create a new inventory organization. So I'm not going to go into the details of all the fields, all the data that you need to enter in the inventory organization form, because that will take a lot of time and that's not the focus of our session. But again, if you're interested, do watch the video on inventory organizations, how to create inventory organizations, and other organization structures, other organization hierarchy as required part of your financial and supply chain management implementation. So to define inventory organizations, we go to facilities, and here manage inventory organization. So let's yeah, that's a big issue in if you want to assign if you want to, okay, let me log in with a different browser, maybe with Microsoft IE or this so in this new browser we can easily access the setup. Somehow it doesn't work properly if you have the setup opened in the same browser multiple times. If it is in a different browser, then it works perfectly fine, but in the same browser somehow it gets distorted and you can't access the forms that you want to access. Anyway, so here I'll go to manufacturing and supply chain management, and then facilities, where you will define the inventory organization. Now click on manage inventory organization. It is pretty easy. The form is much simpler compared to an R12, because you don't enter all the costing information which are mandatory as part of organization parameters, where you need to enter a lot of cost accounting information such as your COGS and deferred COGS. There are many accounts that you are required to enter in the COGS in the organization parameter. It's not required here in Fusion. So let's give it a name as MI inventory org and code as MI org, and business entity will be part of UK. I don't remember exactly the name, so just search with UK business entity. So as soon as you enter the business unit, the default address will come from the business unit, and the legal entity field will be enabled, and you can select the legal entity as part of this primary ledger. When you select the business unit, the primary ledger will default from the business unit. Click on next button, and here there are very few informations that you need to enter. One of them is only the calendar, and then and next one is the item validation organization, so which will select operations. I don't think there is any other mandatory fields. Let's just make this as a manufacturing plant and save it. Save and close. So now a new inventory organization is created, and that inventory organization should now be available in our managed cost organizations profile. So if I now go back and click on add inventory organization, I should be able to see that. So now I can see the new inventory organizations, because this is a new inventory organization which is not assigned to any existing cost organization. So this mapping can exist only from one to one. You cannot have under one cost organizations. You can have multiple inventory organizations, but under one inventory organization, only one inventory organizations can assign to only one cost organization. So next, here you need to select the cost book. So you can select one primary cost book and various let's select the financial cost book, and as our and here we will select the ledger as UK primary ledger. conversion time, corporate currency, the first open period, let's say we are starting from 1st of 2018, and click on OK. So now we have created a cost organization, and that cost organization has one inventory organization and has one cost book. This is the financial book in which all the accounting will take place. Now we can have now we can create another cost book. We can assign another cost book to this cost organizations, where we'll be doing all the reporting and analysis for our MI cost inventory organization. So here I'll select the other cost book that we created, MICB. And for this cost book, I don't need to assign any ledger, because if I try to assign, system will throw an error message, because we can have one cost book with ledger assigned in a single cost organization. However, I need to select the other fields, like the corporate. If you see in the when I selected the ledger, the currency defaulted from there, but because I didn't select any ledger, I have to manually enter the currency as well as the accounting calendar. So the accounting calendar is OCC over here, and the create accounting by default will be disabled, because it's not assigned to a ledger. And we'll select the same first open period, then click on OK. So now when I save it, the setup is completed. So we have created a new cost organization, so we have created a new cost book, and then we map the relationship between the cost organizations and the cost book. And for the purpose and for to complete the setup, we also created an inventory organizations. So now this is the cost organizations. Under this cost organizations, we have only one inventory organizations, but we could have many different inventory organizations under it. And then when system does the transactions, when we do any transactions, then system will create the journals in this cost book if the transaction is done in this inventory organization. So whenever we are doing any transaction in this inventory organization, system will find the corresponding cost book, and then we'll check corresponding cost organizations, and then we'll check what is the primary cost book in that cost organizations, and here system will create the journals. And then we'll have different cost book assigned to it, and system here also system will generate the distributions in which you can see the various values for that specific organization transaction. But system won't be creating any accounting entry, system won't be creating any journals for that. And now click on save and close to go back to the setup page. Next we'll see cost organization data access, which is also another important thing. So once you created a cost organization, that cost organizations won't be available to anyone. So if I now go back to Fusion and try to do any transactions with our cost organizations, it won't be available to me, because I don't have the access to that new cost organization. So let me show you that. So if I click on cost accounting and go to cost accounting module, and try to do any activity. Suppose I want to create a new scenario in the new cost organization. Now when I click on the new cost scenarios, I can see the cost organizations for which I have access. Here I can see the access to all the cost organizations, but I don't have access to the new cost organization that is created. So if I click on the plus signs to create a new cost scenario, and here I have to select the cost organization. Now I can see only these two, UK and US, because I already have access to those two, but I don't have access to the new cost organizations that is created. So first, what I need to do, I need to give access to myself, or whichever person will be working in that cost organizations, then that will be available. And that's done over here, manage cost organizations data access for user. Okay, so here you come over here, and if you want to search what are the access that a specific user already has, then you can select the username and click on search button. Then it will show you all the accesses that user already have as per this security context. It won't be showing you security context for other security context. Now here it is showing me everything, because I have selected users without data access. So instead of doing that, if I select only users with data access and then give the username and security context as cost organization, then it will only show me the cost organizations for which I already have access. Now if I click on this plus sign, then I can enter I can give myself a new organization access. So this is similar to what it was in kind of similar to what we used to have in 11 and R12 called organization access, but that organization access was more in the responsibility level. It was not assigned to a specific user. If a responsibility has access to an organization, then you can do transactions in that organization. So it is a similar concept, but here it's a cost organizations, and second thing, we are giving the access to an user instead of giving it to a responsibility, because there is no such responsibility over here. So enter all the informations, select username, role, security constraint, and security constraint value must provide a value with this attribute. Security constraint value must provide a value for the attribute. Username must provide attribute. Yes, I have selected everything. Then why it is doing this error message? Let me just try to do it again. So give the username, user R12 A2F, role is cost accountant, security context is cost organization, and the cost organization that we created is MI cost org 1. Let me try to save and close. Now it is giving me the error that record already exists. That means the record was already created. So let me just try to requery if it is actually there or not. So enter the username, and role. If you want, you can enter the role, but it is not required. It's you can just query with the username and with cost organization. So now you can see the new cost organizations that we created. MI cost org is available to this user. So initially we had only UK operations and US operations. Now we have the new cost organizations. Now if I go back to costing, the cost module, and try to access this new cost organization, then system should show me that value in the LOV. So I'll go back to cost accounting and try to create a new cost profile with the new cost organization. Manage cost scenario. Sorry, not cost profile, cost scenario. We'll try it over here, and click on plus sign to create a new cost scenario. So here if I now click on the LOV, now I can see the new cost organizations, because initially we didn't have the access. The user didn't have access to the newly created cost organization. Now once you give the access, the user can work on it. So remember, there are two things that always needs to be done before a user can work on a specific cost organization. First, you need to, whenever a new user is created, you need to give them the role, that the cost accountant role, and once that is done, then you need to give the access, the data access to the specific cost organizations where they will be working. And under this cost organizations, we have all the inventories where they can risk, if there is some transactions happening in those specific inventory organizations, then they can create the distributions and create the journals for those transactions. Okay, next is cost profile.